The Rohingya people, the most persecuted minority in the world. As for 2024, more than 25,000 are dead, 1 million displaced outside the country, and another 600,000 living in apartheid inside Myanmar. But how did it happen, and what role did social media play in this genocide? In the northern part of Myanmar, in the Rakhine state, a conflict persists violently. Here, the Rakhine Buddhist majority and the Rohingya Muslims are trapped in a decades-long fight that goes back to World War II. During this period, the Rohingya Muslims, who sided with the British and fought against the Japanese, were promised their Muslim state. The promise was never maintained, and when the war was over, the new Buddhist government in 1948 declared Myanmar independent from the British, while ignoring the existence of the Rohingya, turning them into stateless entities and leading to systematic discrimination that would last decades.
The terrible discrimination and living conditions of the Rohingya Muslim minority. Politics was being denied to the Rohingya. Step by step, they were being excluded from the social and political life of the country. They were being banned from participating in elections. They were being banned from traveling even beyond their village. And so it was becoming impossible for them to continue following this political path. And younger people were starting to think about dispensing with the non-violent approach that the Rohingya community has taken throughout the decades. And we felt that if there was an organized resistance, armed resistance forming among Rohingya communities, that this could trigger serious military action against that community. And there was a very high risk that that would result in atrocities.
In 2012, the Rohingya formed an armed resistance called the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, which launched its first attack against the Myanmar military in 2016. The military retaliated, and the deaths on both sides amounted to hundreds. In 2017, the group attacked 24 police posts and an army base, with an official death toll of 77 Rohingya insurgents and 12 security forces.
There was a terrorist incident, or at least a killing. You can characterize it as you wish. It was after some exchanges, some killing on both sides. But to argue that the response to that should be the displacement of 600,000 people is an outrage. It really went way beyond calling to justice those who are responsible, and it clearly is ethnic cleansing by classic definition.
Between August and December 2017, around 700,000 Rohingya fled to Bangladesh to avoid ethnic and religious persecution by Myanmar security forces in their clearance operations, joining an additional 300,000 Rohingya refugees who had arrived after fleeing earlier waves of violence. Almost 1 million refugees live now in the Kutupalong camp, the world's largest and most densely populated worldwide.
They're horrible. The line for food was a mile long. The line for food. Think about that, with tens and 100,000 people gathered, with virtually no public health care, no drinkable water, cholera starting to show its face.
Almost 200,000 families live in shelters made of bamboo under extreme weather conditions, with poor access to water and food, no health care, and no proper sanitation facilities. But what role did social media play in escalating the situation to its present critical state?
At the beginning of the military campaign, there was also another campaign online. It began with thousands of Twitter accounts, which were created shortly after militant attacks on police outposts in Rakhine state. And among those Twitter accounts, they were mainly spreading hateful content about Rohingya and blaming them for the attacks at large. On Facebook, posts were circulated that were dehumanizing the Rohingya, comparing them to dogs and insects and vermin. And they were shared alongside links to dubious accounts, which we have now learned were likely orchestrated by the military.
Those platforms were used extensively to target and shame not only the Rohingya, but also Burmese citizens who showed empathy towards them and were often labeled as traitors. Women, in particular, faced severe and degrading attacks on Facebook. This tactic effectively prevented public support for the Rohingya and was instrumental in generating public outrage against Muslims and anyone challenging the prevailing narratives of Buddhist Burman authority.
These are tools that could potentially be used by autocrats. And one of the many sort of sketchy things Facebook did, they said any government, if it's recognized by the UN, then they can have any data about their subjects that they want, right? And well, it isn't the same to give that information to, Iceland as it is to Myanmar.
In Myanmar, almost 40% of the population primarily relies on Facebook for their news, emphasizing Facebook's huge influence in shaping public opinion and disseminating information in the country. Despite receiving warnings from activists, NGOs, and possibly internal sources, the company did not take effective action to stop these issues.
Only when the UN issued a report which implicated Facebook in Myanmar's crisis did Facebook take any kind of action at all. They've since hired more local content moderators, but this debacle for me raises several questions which are quite pressing, and chief among them is, what are social media platforms' human rights responsibilities?
Social media has a very ambivalent role in our societies, particularly in conflict situations. If, on one side, they are a positive force that can act as a mobilization channel, as an early warning before an attack, or raising awareness about the humanitarian aspects of conflicts, on the other side, it is being used to spread misinformation, instigate violence, and act as a divisive element by creating echo chambers and reinforcing existing biases and beliefs.
And the important thing to recognize is that these things are going to get increasingly competitive because they have to get more attention, which means Facebook, Google, YouTube are going to increasingly rely on these digital Frankensteins, and they don't know what they're showing because how many engineers at Facebook speak Burmese? And yet the consequences of the lives that they're shaping are enormous, with an intrinsic bias towards radicalizing and sensationalizing.
Facebook and other platforms were essential in carving what will be the fate of the Rohingya people, and they may have to be held accountable one day. As for now, in 2024, a lawsuit against Facebook from a Rohingya refugee has been dismissed based on the claim that the plaintiffs waited too long to sue. The manipulation of information has long been a military strategy, but with the rise of social media, information warfare has emerged as a new front in modern conflicts. And Myanmar's genocide, and in most recent years, the coup against the government, is a clear and horrific example of such campaigns.
But the coup itself has deeply undermined the hopes of the Rohingya community, the Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh, that they will be able to return home, because the perpetrators of the violence against them are now running the country.
In February 2021, Myanmar's military seized power. They immediately targeted internet access, blocked platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, imposed nightly blackouts, and completely disabled mobile internet. Ironically, the tools that were once used to spread misinformation and hate against the Rohingya people are the ones that, now, the perpetrators fear the most. For the Rohingya, at the moment, there is no solution in sight. Going back to Myanmar is out of the question, and the economic instability of Bangladesh is starting to lay the basis for an internal crisis against them. Meanwhile, the international community, busy with other wars and crises around the world, is slowly forgetting about the Rohingya, and some NGOs are fearing the spread of religious radicalization inside the camps, which could leave the ground for international Islamist recruiters to take advantage of the desperate Rohingya youth.
Myanmar is a very extreme case, but it's not the first time that social media has been used to spread hate, violence, and fake information. What do you think about the role of Facebook, X, and other social media platforms in conflict situations? How can something like this be prevented in the future? Let us know what you think in the comment area below. I really hope you enjoyed this mini doc, and if you did, down below there are some links to a long form documentary for you to watch. Please like, follow, comment, and don't forget, if anyone has a different opinion than yours, it doesn't mean they are your enemy. Stay safe and see you in the next episode.